Hola, mi gente. My name is Maria Lopez Twena. I'm the author of the bilingual children's chapter book and animated family series, Mariví, the Master Navigator, and the creator of this new podcast, Navigating Dos Mares, or Navigating Two Seas. Mariví, the Master Navigator was created for all immigrant families, but especially for children who are growing up with two cultures and two languages, navigating life for both themselves and their foreign-born relatives. This podcast, Navigating Dos Mares, was created to help us older kids or the adult children of immigrants better understand our childhood experiences and the impact that they've had on our lives. In the next 3 episodes, we'll be interviewing individuals as they share both their stories on growing up with two languages and two cultures and how they've used their childhood experiences as their superpower today. Thanks for joining our community. Bienvenidos.
In this episode, we'll be speaking to Vianni Lubus, Head of Audience and Engagement at Guerrero Media and VP of its Hispanic Division. Vianni, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, super excited to talk about your experience of being a child of immigrants. So let's start with your background. Tell us about yourself.
Yes. So thank you for asking a bit about my background. So I was born in Puerto Rico. I was born in Ponce, which is on the southern part of the island. That is where the majority of my family is from. However, I spent the majority of my childhood in a small, very small rural town called Guayama, which is also in the southern part of the island. It's about 30 minutes away from Ponce, where I was born. And it was a really lovely setting. Our house sat on an acre of land that backed into the mountains. It was beautiful. It was surrounded by rivers. There was a horse stable, next to our house. So certainly a very rural setting to kind of set the stage. And I just have, honestly, the fondest memories of my childhood there. I spent every day just running around outside with our neighbors, with my brother. We have a 4-year age gap, but we're incredibly close. Lots of innocence and joy, and as most childhoods are. So yeah.
Great. Okay. And so at some point, your parents immigrate to the U.S. Tell us about that and what you remember about your childhood and what the household, if it was multi-generational, the language spoken in the household, et cetera.
Yeah. So it wasn't until the age of 11 that my life then took sort of this very significant turn. My parents separated. And so that really changed the course of our life. It was certainly sort of the impetus. It was the event that led my mother to decide to move to the United States, sort of leave everything behind, seek a fresh start. And so that was sort of the impetus for our moving. And the story of my transition from Puerto Rico to the States, I think is very important for me and for my life, because there's this moment this summer in which all of it sort of unfolded. We ended up moving to Michigan, in fact, and it's an incredibly kind of the epitome of a culture shock type of story, if you will, because it was the most sort of rural places in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So going from Puerto Rico to Michigan, having never left the island, was quite significant. So my time in Puerto Rico when I was in school was, I attended private American schools, which at the time in the 80s and 90s, those didn't really exist in Puerto Rico. There were maybe a handful of them. And I attended 2 of them. And so, you spoke English, you had American teachers, you couldn't speak Spanish in the classroom, obviously. Everything was taught in English. And so I was very well acquainted to just sort of daily life in English and with sort of, American experiences around you. So that was really actually pivotal, and it made the prospect of moving so much less scary in so many ways. Whereas I think had that not been the case, it would have even been a more scary prospect altogether. But and another piece too is my family. I sensed I was very fascinated with American culture, even in Puerto Rico as a Puerto Rican kid. I think that stemmed from my education and the schools that I went to. But even in my household, we never watched Spanish language TV. In fact, I think my parents just didn't like it. But we're big movie people, big movie buffs, and all of our movies, oftentimes at my friend's house or at different households, you watch the movie either in Spanish with English subtitles or in English with the Spanish subtitles. For us, my parents were really centered around always wanting to ensure that my brother and I were always watching, English language, TV and movies. And so it was just kind of both at home and at school, it was very ingrained. So again, for me, I think in some ways, I feel like they felt we eventually would leave, even though we had a beautiful life in Puerto Rico. So again, all of those things really did help prepare me and my family to adjust to life in the States.
Wow. Okay. What an interesting story. Okay. So you get to the States, you're now living in a multi-generational household with your uncle and extended family. You're familiar with English and the American culture. Is the household still consuming English content or watching English television now at your uncle's house? And what is it like your first day of school?
Yes. You know what? I'd say yes. I'm trying to recall. Once we got to Michigan, I think in some ways Puerto Rico was much more. How can I express this? Much more apparent in the house, and I say that in a way that the daily food that we consumed. Being surrounded by all of my cousins, albeit we were in Michigan. I mean, it was even because they, the music that they listened to, I don't know about the TV, perhaps. I think movies and all of that, I think they were very well acclimated and acculturated. And so a lot of that sort of stayed very much to what I had known.
So Spanish spoken within
Yes.
the household, English spoken with your cousins and your sibling, or no?
Yes. Oh, no. All Spanish. Yep. I was very much still speaking Spanish on the regular at home. But of course, externally, that was all, it was English only from there.
And in the school, was it, did you have a diverse school population? Was it all non-Hispanic? What did that look like?
Yes. You asked about the first day of school. Oh my gosh. So, I mean, the moment I arrived in Michigan, I started to see that the realities of what I expected living in the States was so different than, or my expectations were so different than the realities of living in the US. There were so many I truly experienced culture shock to the max. And I can give you some examples of that. My first day at school, I remember, my gosh, that was such a scary day. I was so afraid. I'm walking into 6th grade. This is such an important time in young adults' life or children's lives, I guess, early young adults, that for me, I was terrified. I remember that. But because I had the experiences of these American schools in Puerto Rico, it was less, I think I adapted pretty quickly. By the end of the first week, I felt like, okay, this isn't so bad. I will say to some extent, in terms of the population, let me first start there. It was called a township. I mean, this was a very small town. I think maybe, I might have this wrong, but like 5,000 people in total for population. You could drive the entire town in like 10 minutes. So that was very different. Even coming from small towns in Puerto Rico, it was nothing compared to what I was used to. But, and so because it was so rural and in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the population there, absolutely all white. There was no diversity. We were for sure the only Latino family in that entire area. And so we stood out so much. I mean, I remember in school sitting around, and I actually did an audit in my brain while sitting in a classroom. Not right away. I'm sure this sort of hit me later on as I was just now getting used to being up there, that everybody was blonde and blue eyes. And I think there was only one other girl who had brown hair. And so I very much stood out. And by extension, that made me interesting to all of the young kids. So in some ways, and I hesitate to say it, but I became popular right away because of sort of people finding me interesting and unique. And so everyone wanted to sort of engage with me and talk with me. And that obviously helped the transition. That helped ease me into, being able to find friends right away and being able to just connect, frankly. And so that was helpful. My brother, on the other hand, had a completely opposite experience. It was very tough for him. People didn't accept him as much. He was bullied and, there was a lot going on. And so he and I experienced completely different experiences as we started school in the States, which was really interesting. And in fact, 3 years later, he returned. He was like, I'm out of here, and so he did go back to Puerto Rico, and he's still there because of the experiences that he had as a young adult. But for me, it was a much different experience. So I don't know if it was sort of the age in which I was going. A lot of the kids around me were very naive to sort of what Puerto Rico was. Nobody knew, of course, what Puerto Rico was, had never heard of it. Obviously, but also it was interesting because I had so many interesting and funny and memorable experiences. Like I would have kids come up to me and ask me, did you live in huts? And did you have McDonald's? And were there shopping? Like they thought I lived in the most primitive area. I don't, but again, I chalk this up to, 12-year-olds who just don't know anything outside of their, probably have not traveled, but, so it was funny. I found it to be sort of hilarious. I don't think at that time I took any offense to it. I remember thinking it is much more advanced than where I am, so I just thought it was kind of funny to experience these conversations.
How about from a cultural perspective? Did you have any culture clashes?
So often we felt as though things were much more lax. And by lax, it was even down to what you wear when you go to church or what you wear when you go to, formal gatherings or, how you treat that occasion. It was a lot more casual. And I feel like, and we always did the opposite. And so that always became a sort of a point of contention because you always felt, again, like you were standing out and like they were not receiving that moment or that occasion in the same way that you were. And so I remember that. And I think that still even comes up today. That was something that I specifically remember.
Yeah, definitely the attire and dressing up. I remember for us, jeans. My mother didn't want us to wear jeans for a long time. Yeah.
Yes, we did. We did wear jeans, but everything had to be formal, like whatever your top, your shoes, the shoes was very important.
Yes. Yeah.
No flip-flops. I mean, all of that.
At what age did you wear makeup?
That's a good question. My mother is like a makeup artist, so she probably let me do it earlier. I don't remember, but probably like 14, 15 maybe.
Okay. Do you have a sense as you moved into adulthood and have revisited your life experience, did you have a sense of retroacculturation? Do you remember when that happened and what was the trigger?
Well, it's interesting because I think my specific situation called for summers in Puerto Rico with my father became the norm. And it provided for me sort of a great balance between my life in the US and my roots and always staying very connected to Puerto Rico because my whole family, like I mentioned, my brother went back 3 years later. And so I have so much connection to going back often and being, sort of, right back into it. And it's interesting because the first year, so once I had left and I did not return to Puerto Rico for a year until a year later, at the age of 13, the first year back was like so emotional, so exciting. I could easily reconnect with friends and family then. However, as the years passed, it became much more difficult. I mean, I was always thrilled to go to be with my father. That was my time, my sacred time with him. But I started to feel so much stress and so much anxiety about going back over the years. And it goes back to, at that age again, the clothes that you wear, the music you listen to, it's also crucial. And so I worried so much about fitting back into the Puerto Rican ecosystem, if you will. And so that was very that was very difficult for me. But it kept me really connected.
How have you used your upbringing and your bilingualism and your biculturalism as your superpower today?
Yeah. It really has become a superpower for me professionally. I do work in a space, and I'm very lucky for that. I feel very blessed about that, where I do connect back to my roots every single day, which, I do find is a rarity. I work in marketing at an executive advancement firm called Guerrero Media. As you mentioned, it's owned by a Mexican-American founder, and we publish a publication called Hispanic Executive. And the whole mission of that is to amplify the stories of Latino leadership in America. And so I get to interact with, talk with, build relationships with so many different Latinos across the US and have these types of conversations, speak to them in Spanish. I speak to my team in Spanglish all the time. I'm still very connected to my culture, and it has 100% given me a huge advantage because of my background. And so I feel, again, it's a rarity, and I feel lucky that I found a place to work, and that the work that I do does not feel like work because it is always tying back to my upbringing and my roots. I also, some personal traits, like that's on the professional side, but personally, I sense, and some may view this as a fault, but I see many advantages to it. I now consider myself someone who just doesn't get overly attached to things or people. Because of the experiences that I had, having to detach myself from everything that I know when I moved and leaving everything behind, I'm just always able to, I think it makes me much more adaptable and less emotional in many ways, to just be more resilient and less reliant on material possessions. And, I can adapt to a new town very easily. There's a lot of adaptability and resiliency that comes with it. I think young adults are so resilient. I think we all are. And so I say use that to your advantage. Be open, be honest, be authentic, be you. In hindsight, so many of the feelings and emotions that I felt as a young adult, I look back and you learn so much from that. So know that whatever you're going through, you're obviously going to come out on the other side, but you're going to learn so much about yourself, and it's going to shape who you are, and it's going to be beautiful. So that's what my experience says that, and I 100% believe it for others. So.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of my favorite sayings. I don't know who shared it with me. Life happens for you, not to you.
To you. Mm-hmm. And it's all about how you react to it.
Yes, that's right. But everything happens for a reason. It's all purposeful. It's all for yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Wow. Thank you, Vianni, so much. Really appreciate your time and your insights and your wisdom and your life experience. Thanks for sharing with us. And if you want to follow Vianni, she can be found at LinkedIn. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, and please join us on our next episode of Navigating Dos Mares. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at We Are Mariví, or check out our books on our website, wearemariv.com.